It was my hope to be able to show you pictures upon my coming back. Since I made a lot of pictures I'm actually happy with. But I realized it would be much easier to show you pictures when I'm on Zoom than actually to show them somehow here and have the Zoom people able to see them. So you will get the pictures not next week when we're all at yearly meeting, but the week after that, the first Sunday in August. When I'm on Zoom, you'll get the pictures. Nonetheless, this week, you get the sermon about the pictures. So try to keep this sermon in mind 2 weeks from now when I actually show the pictures. But this week, you get the sermon about the pictures because, in fact, it's a sermon about something else as well. Anyway, I'm going to start with the first part of Psalm 19, which is just about my favorite psalm. The heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours forth speech, and night unto night declares knowledge. There is no speech, there are no words, neither is their voice heard, yet their sound goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. As a photographer, one of the most challenging aspects of your art, at least if you see photography as a means of communicating something about the world and not simply as showing a pattern or a design or a field of colors. But if you see photography as a means of communicating something about the world, then it's particularly challenging if you make pictures in one culture to be viewed by an audience in another culture, because by and large, we are only able to see what we already know how to recognize. We are able to recognize a woman with hands folded together and eyes closed, perhaps on her knees, perhaps standing at an altar as a woman at prayer, because that is what we have seen many times. Because we have seen enough pictures with explanatory captions, we are also able to recognize a barefoot man bent over at the waist, face to the floor, arms outstretched before him, in an empty room with other men in the same posture on similar rugs as a man at prayer. We do not draw that same conclusion about a circle of men and women jumping up and down in a dance. Even though they are at prayer, we haven't seen that, and we don't understand the photograph as a photograph of prayer. Consider also how we tend our babies. A woman from Samburu in Kenya ties her 1-year-old to her back in a blanket when she has to go on her errands. We put our 1-year-old in a stroller. We can recognize the Samburu woman as caring for her child because she is touching. But would she recognize us as caring for our child when we push it in a stroller and do not touch it? Or you might see a picture of the Irish sport of hurling and thinking that it looks like lacrosse, because in fact it does look like lacrosse, and both of them involve a ball and a stick. And you could wonder how the Irish and the Iroquois came up with the same game, invented the same game. But you wouldn't realize, if you only saw the picture, how different the rules of hurling and lacrosse are. And so you would think that you understood what was going on in the picture, when in fact you don't understand what's going on in the picture. And your thought that the pictures are equivalent leads you to a rather large mistake. So those are the challenges, and yet a photographer like myself persists because there are commonalities among human beings, no matter what we don't understand because of culture. The reason that I love the 19th Psalm is because in those first stanzas, it speaks about this kind of apprehension of transcendence, this idea that there is something that we don't understand that goes on beyond ourselves. And that in some way we are a part of through our relationship with God. The desire to be a part of something beyond ourselves, something larger than ourselves, is why people join choirs and bands, place the host of Holy Communion upon their tongues, crowd into football stadiums and cheer for the home team, walk door to canvass for political candidates. The list could go on and on. I believe that the quest to connect to something beyond ourselves is a trait of all of humanity. And yet visually, it takes so many different forms. A person kneeling in solitary prayer looks quite different than the violin section of an orchestra. So not only in photographs, but in life itself, this is why it behooves us to learn how to look at the other with a capital O, to look at the other with imagination. Because what is common to us, the human longings and aspirations that we share despite our individuality and across our varied cultures, they do not always look common. They don't look like something that we share. And since we are better at loving the neighbor who looks like us than we are at loving the neighbor who does not, faithfulness itself, the desire to love as God loves, requires that we use imagination to build our empathy with the other who is not at all like us and yet is, in fact, exactly like us in the most important way, which is the fact of being created by God. God has never called me, led me, invited me into being a person who dances, or for that matter, one who shows exuberant emotion, either glee or sorrow. But with imagination, I can recognize in a synchronized, dancing, prayerful crowd the same transcendent connection to the ground of being that I myself may find in silence or in the communion of a gathered meeting or gazing into a black night sky filled with both stars and fireflies. I was, in fact, when I was photographing, caught up in a crowd that was dancing in Turkana, where the people are shepherds and have a long tradition of following their flocks. Every man and woman has a stick of some kind. The men's sticks are about waist high and have kind of a hook on the end, somewhat like a cane, somewhat like a shepherd's crook, and also meant as a form of defense against wild animals. They carry these sticks everywhere, all day long. The women's sticks at this point are a little more ceremonial, but theirs are more like very thin walking sticks. They're about as tall as the woman is. They're much thinner, and they're just used for walking. I suppose if you have to, you can whack a lion with it, but it would not be as useful as the man's club in a way. When the men and women don their ceremonial garb for dancing, they dance with their sticks in hand. The men's sticks about this high and the women's sticks about this high. And I got caught up in a crowd of dancers and realized, to my alarm, that one of the dancing women had gotten her stick stuck between my legs. I had some fear of becoming unmanned, since there were portions of the dance where the people bent over. And any bending over of this woman would have sent her stick in a direction that I did not like to contemplate. I tried to back up, but at the moment there was a tent behind me full of people and I couldn't back up. She wasn't moving forward and I was really beginning to get concerned when there was a brief break. She stepped forward about a foot. I stepped backwards about a foot. I freed myself and life went on in a happier direction. But I've been thinking about how we usually do not use that degree of imagination when we are confronted by the other. Let's say, for instance, the other who happens to be in our own family, the other who happens to be at our workplace. We spend a lot of time assuming that we understand or need to understand the other more than we need to perhaps love them. And in that case, my response to this woman would have been to upbraid her and say, why are you carrying around such a large stick? Don't you know how dangerous that can be? Look at how you almost damaged me. I would have perhaps tried to take the stick from her. I would have tried to persuade her that she was wrong to carry a stick. I would not simply have dislodged myself from the stick, let her have her stick, and we could go our own separate ways. We spend so much time around other people, asking them to be different than they are, not for their comfort or their safety, but for our comfort. I think that's especially true with the people we know the most. Why can't you be different than you are? When really the most important thing is, number one, if they have a stick aimed at a sensitive part of your body, to dislodge yourself from the stick, back up, and then see whether they're harming themselves. If they're harming themselves, do what it may take so that they stop harming themselves. But my own comfort is not really part of it. My imagination, to see them as someone both other than me and completely like me, desiring the same things that I want in totally different ways. That's a part of me that comes from God and that I can encourage in myself. Through the awareness that the other is the other, equally as beloved by God as I am, and yet not the same. I think it's easier to see that sometimes in people that we are farther from than people we are closer to. We're united in our desire to be beyond ourselves. We are united in the way we get all tangled up in ourselves. We can constantly ask God to transform us into people who can love the otherness of the other. Engage with the otherness of those who seem most like us. And be more concerned for the comfort of others than we are for our own comfort.